Hey, BillO'Reilly.com premium members, welcome to the No Spin News on audio today because I'm out here on Eastern Long Island soaking up the end of the summer. And we'll be back on video on Monday, but this week will be audio unless something, explodes. So we got a lot to talk to you about today, and it's very interesting. First, of course, is the president's speech last night in Afghanistan. You have two choices in Afghanistan. You can leave, and the predictable consequence of leaving would be that the Taliban would take over most of the country. Kabul might be able to hold out. Bagram Air Force Base outside of Kabul, where the U.S. Troops are based, that would hold out, but primarily the Taliban would run the country. So that's what would happen. There's no real debate on that. And then the Taliban would let ISIS and Al-Qaeda and every other terrorist group do what they want. So you'd be right back to where you were in 2000. So that's option number one, get out. We did the best we could. It was a noble endeavor, which it was, but the Afghan people are not strong enough to fight their own battles, and they never will be. Okay, so that's the option that President Trump rejected. What he accepted was a ongoing presence like Korea, but with bullets flying, where we're there, and NATO, they're there too, but not to the extent that we are, with about 10, 12,000 American troops. And then we're basically firefighters. So when the Taliban pops up, we whack-a-mole them back, and we keep the country out of the hands of the Taliban. So that's the option that President Trump has embraced. He said, okay, we're willing to spend the money. And, at that level, you're talking, 50, 60 deaths a year, unless there's a chopper crash or something, and maybe 300 wounds. It's substantial. It's not trivial. But that would keep the country in place. Now, I'd like to talk to Secretary of Defense Mattis about this because he knows more than anybody. I'd like to see, look, do you have any hope at all the Afghan army and police services can control their country? Or is it just not ever going to happen? I'd like to, have that conversation with Mattis, but Mattis isn't going to certainly answer those questions. But he knows. Mattis knows. Now, I was, you may remember, over there in Afghanistan, and the primitive nature of the country is just startling. It's tribalism with Islam driving behavior. And depending on where you are on the religious scale, there are some liberal Islamists and some very, very conservative Islamists. That dictates how you behave. The Taliban are fundamentalists. They're going to come in, it's Sharia law. It was one thing that struck me when I was driving into Kabul from the airport, and we flew in on a big transport plane. And there was no lights in the country. I remember sitting in the cockpit telling the pilot, are we close by? And he goes, yeah, we're going to land in 15 minutes. I looked down. I said, well, there's no light. He goes, well, they don't have electricity, only the big cities. So it was like black. I thought we were over the ocean. But anyway, you get into a primitive society, and I was riding into Kabul in a car with my bodyguards, and I said, stop for a moment, and the car stopped, and on the side of the street was this cement wall with these iron round things, and what looked like rust all over the place. And I said, what's that? That caught my eye. Because that's where, and the bodyguard said to me, that's where the Taliban would put people for public floggings. If they committed adultery, if they were gay or anything like that, they'd shackle them into these cast iron round things up against a concrete wall and beat them. And so everybody could see it. I mean, that's the kind of society the Taliban imposed. So President Trump, made the case, said, look, we got to stay there because we can't have this 9/11 situation again, where you have a breeding ground and a training ground for ISIS and Al Qaeda. So you have to do it. Most Americans, I think, agree with that, even though it's frustrating. They say it's the longest war in American history, but yeah, we're not really fighting the war. If we were fighting the war, we'd invade Pakistan and kill all the Taliban who's hiding up in the northwest quadrant. And what are you going to do with Pakistan? I mean, he says that, they're going to get tougher on them, but, it's okay. But they're not going to. The Pakistani government's chaotic. There's a lot of Islamists in the government. Some people want to root out the terrorists. Some people don't. There's assassinations all over the place. The country's out of control. They have a nuke. So there's only so much we can do over there. I'm not expecting, great strides by Pakistan to fight the Taliban. It's not going to do it. So very frustrating. The rest of the world doesn't care about Afghanistan. They don't really care about Al Qaeda or ISIS. They're basically trying to avoid being killed, but are they going to, help us? No. It's all us, always us. Very frustrating. But I don't think the American people were angry with the speech last night. It was good to see President Trump being a president rather than involved in all this crazy stuff. All right, so the president travels tonight to Phoenix, Arizona, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, big rally. He's got plenty of supporters in Arizona. That's why he's going. The governor of Arizona, is a conservative guy, Doug Ducey. He's not going to be at the rally, but he will greet Trump. The two Republican senators don't like him, Flake and McCain. They won't be anywhere near there. I do believe that President Trump will pardon Sheriff Arpaio, who's convicted of violating federal law in immigration by having his local guys do federal work. I think that Arpaio will be pardoned tonight. That'll be a big headline. Tomorrow everybody will be screaming about it. You can expect a stem winder from President Trump. He will vent, and then Arpaio will get the pardon. All right, now let's change gears a little bit and tell you about a story that's extremely, extremely troubling. This far-left intimidation of sponsorship is out of control, and they did that to me. Media Matters, and there's a whole bunch of these groups. So the latest victim is a group called Jihad Watch, all right? And Jihad Watch is an organization that warns the world about the dangers of Muslim fundamentalism and terrorism. Well, a group, ProPublica, funded by George Soros, has targeted Jihad Watch and its director, Robert Spencer, and they've convinced PayPal to ban any donations to Jihad Watch. This is what these people do. They threaten PayPal or Amazon or any of that. ProPublica is just an arm of this crew that attacks people with whom they disagree. So they're threatening Amazon, Newsmax, PayPal for maintaining partnerships with Jihad Watch, not in the sense that they're editorially partnered up. They're not. They just allow donations to flow in. So let's bring in Robert Spencer, who's the director, as I mentioned, of Jihad Watch. So this doesn't surprise you, right? I mean, you've been under fire for a long time as being anti-Muslim, your group, correct?
Yeah, but that in itself is just a tactic to try to get us shut down. I'm no more anti-Muslim than foes of the Nazis during World War II were anti-German. It's just a canard. To oppose jihad terror is not hateful or bigoted, but the Southern Poverty Law Center has its hate groups list, and they put us on it a few years ago, as they put on many legitimate conservative groups that have perfectly reasonable opinions. We don't advocate for violence. We don't call for vigilante action. We don't smear innocent people, none of these things. But the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group list is full of legitimate groups that just dissent from the hard left line. And after Charlottesville, groups like ProPublica and other Soros-funded organizations are putting pressure on advertisers and social media platforms to shut us all out without ever examining, well, wait a minute, is this list really reliable? Are we really hate groups? And
Okay.
Of course we're not.
So most people don't know what your group does. Why with the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I do agree that this group is now a far-left advocacy group. That's what it's become. Why would they object to you if you're just basically raising alarm at Terra?
Well, it's been going on for years that I can remember the very first time I was actually on a show on MSNBC with Ibrahim Hooper of the Council on American Islamic Relations. And I quoted some statistics from a survey that was conducted by a Muslim sheikh saying that 80% of the mosques in the United States were teaching extremism. And Hooper, in response, said, Spencer's a hate monger. And I was sort of stunned because I thought, well, wait a minute, you didn't answer the problem about the survey. You just said that I was a hate monger, but that is the tactic that they use. And they've convinced the left, these Islamic advocacy groups like CARE, they've convinced the left that to oppose jihad terror, to speak about the motivating ideology of the jihad terrorists and how they use the texts of Islam to make recruits among peaceful Muslims, that all that is hate. And they charge that, of course, they've been trying to shut us down for years as well because they don't want honest discussion of these issues.
How do you see the Prophet Muhammad?
Well, Muhammad, obviously he's the revered figure in Islam, and the problematic aspect of him. I wrote a biography of Muhammad a few years ago, The Truth About Muhammad. And if you look at the earliest Islamic texts about his life, they do show that he's leading campaigns of war. He's calling upon people to assassinate his enemies. He did marry the 9-year-old girl when he's 54. And so when you have that, and he's held up in the Quran as the excellent example, the one that Muslims should imitate, that causes a whole lot of problematic behavior among Muslims worldwide, thinking that they're imitating Muhammad, they're doing something that's good, when they're actually abusing girls and committing warfare against unbelievers and oppressing Jews and so on.
But if you are going to use Muhammad as a negative example, wouldn't that demonize all Muslims in the world, even the moderate Muslims who believe in Islam, believe that the Prophet was the direct conduit to Allah, even though these things did happen way back when? So wouldn't they have a point that basically by pointing this out about the Prophet, and I don't know whether he reformed or whether he was different at the end of his life, I don't know. But if you're going to say that Muhammad was a warmonger and was marrying 9-year-old girls, that pretty much puts everyone who believes in Islam in a bad spot, does it not?
Only if they're not willing to confront the problematic aspects of that. My dear friend Tashbi Sayed, who passed away a few years ago, he was a Muslim reformer, a genuine Muslim reformer, who called for a general reevaluation of Muhammad's status as the excellent example among Muslims and said, look, there are these aspects of Muhammad's life and career that these jihadis are exploiting, that child abusers are exploiting, that oppressors of women are exploiting. We have to be honest about that and work for genuine reform by finding some way to mitigate the literal importance of these texts. And so I think that Muslims who follow in the footsteps of Tashbi Sayed are exemplary individuals, and I support them 100%. It is not in the least anti-Muslim to oppose the justification of religious warfare and the justification of child abuse and so on that is done by pointing to Islamic texts.
Okay, I get the subtlety of the argument, and but that in this world, you're either for us or against us, and then you and your group have been saying, well, you're anti-Muslim because you attack the Prophet, and if you put that message out, the far left.
I don't even attack the Prophet, Bill. I just say what he did.
I understand.
My biography of Muhammad is based on sources that are written by Muslims. This is within Islamic tradition. These things were held up. And they report that Aisha, his 9-year-old bride, was 9 years old when he consummated the marriage. This is not something that I wrote or found in some dusty corner. It's in mainstream Islamic sources that go back to the time of Muhammad.
All right, but it's it's a complicated emotional issue. I'm not sticking up for the attacks on Jihad Watch. I'm trying to understand basically how the far left is embracing trying to shut you down. I don't understand that at all. Even if they disagree with your characterization of Muhammad, and they are objecting to the strong tone you're taking against Muslims who revere Muhammad. Even if they do, you certainly have a right to print and say what you want. And so why are they trying to destroy you?
Yeah, the texts say what they say. I mean, I think that the left has a huge moral blind spot when it comes to Islam, that feminists suddenly stop talking about women's rights when they see the institutionalized oppression of women under Islamic law. The Quran says if there's a woman from whom you fear obedience, then beat her. And we don't hear from feminists about that. And why not? And
well, it's the same thing with the Same thing with the Old Testament, though. You can pull out a lot of stuff in the Old Testament that's pretty grisly about
But those
women.
things are dead letters, whereas with the Quran, these things are being acted upon now
Sometimes.
and are considered to be part of the live religion.
Okay. So now they've succeeded in getting PayPal to disassociate itself on a business plane with you. What can I get letters like this? What can regular people do, if anything, to protect your right to operate freely?
Well, the thing is, we have to recognize in the first place that there is a concerted effort to silence and stigmatize, demonize, and absolutely marginalize every voice that does not conform to the leftist line.
Right.
And so we have to stand up to it. PayPal actually got inundated with protests from people who support our work, and they turned around, and they just reinstated me not long ago.
Oh, good.
But the thing is, I'm not going back. Yeah, but I'm not going back to them because I know what they are now. And we have to vote with our feet and show these people that they can't just make us jump through their hoops and conform to their political line.
But shouldn't, though, I mean, can a case be made, Mr. Spencer, that because PayPal did finally do the right thing, that maybe you should do business with them and say, look, they came around, they listened to our point of view, and, accept them back?
I think you have a very good point there, actually, and I'll think about that. I just don't want to reinforce the idea that these services should be withheld or get supplied based on one's conformity to the leftist political line.
No, I understand, but I think that in this charged era, that anybody who does the right thing should be rewarded because, look, Media Matters attacked me, and in the next few weeks we're going to, have some pretty startling information about that. And the sponsors basically said, look, we're going to pull out of the O'Reilly factory because we don't want the grief. We don't know what happened. We don't really care what happened. We just don't want the grief. Same thing with Ivanka Trump's clothing line and Nordstrom. Same thing. All right, we just don't want the grief, so we're going to just advertise someplace else. When a company says, you know what, we'll take the grief because it's wrong what's happening, I think they should be rewarded. So I'm glad you're going to take another look at it. But regular folks, I mean, it's about awareness, which is why we're doing a segment today with you, that these people are now attacking, as you said, anyone with whom they disagree on any issue and trying to silence them and hurt them as much as they can. But again, what can regular Americans do other than rally to the cause of the people who are being attacked?
Well, I think also we have to expose the people that are doing this, that this ProPublica organization, this is not a news service and shouldn't be treated as such. And these people need to be revealed for what they are. I'm not talking about any kind of illegal activity or something. I just mean that in the court of public opinion, they need to be exposed for what they really are, which is hard left propagandists and actual fascists trying to shut down and intimidate people who disagree with them.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not going to be done by the mainstream media because they sympathize with ProPublica, as you know.
Oh, certainly, yes.
Right. So
the mainstream is just as bad. The CNN published the Southern Poverty Law Center hate list, which includes me and so many other legitimate groups, right after the Charlottesville attack, and said, here are the hate groups in your area. That's like printing a big target on my back.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Spencer, keep us informed of what happens. We appreciate you coming on in. And I do agree that, and it's why I'm doing these segments, that this is a horrible problem in America, a horrible problem. Whereas you got
it's getting worse.
Right, the far left, they're organized, they have millions and millions of dollars, and they are going after anybody with whom they disagree. All right, and the other news that I want you to know about, Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl has decided to be tried by a judge, not a military jury, on charges that he endangered comrades by deserting in Afghanistan. A trial, and many of you are very interested in that, is going to commence in October, but, you know, it's been postponed so many times that anything can happen. You know, I don't know how Bergdahl gets out of this, you know, because guys were hurt searching for him after he deserted. That's the fact. I don't know how he gets out of it. All right, how about the IRS scandal under President Obama? Remember in my interview with him, he told me there wasn't a smidgen of evidence that anybody in the IRS targeted conservative groups. It turned out not to be true, but nothing happened. However, now Judge Reggie Walton, U.S. District Court in D.C., has ordered the IRS to provide more information about groups that were targeted and who targeted them from within the IRS. So this is because of private lawsuits, not government watchdogs. All right? So private lawsuits, and again, it's run by groups that are interested in the welfare of this country. And this is Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch is a good group. So they sued, and now a judge said to the IRS, you better come up with more stuff. We know it's out there, and we want to see it. So we're following that story as well. Marijuana. Everybody's high on consolation, as Hall & Oates once sang. Want free pot, legalize pot, pot for meds, pot for everything. Well, if you are a heavy pot smoker, research shows that you are in danger of hypertension. Study in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. So the more pot you smoke, the more hypertense you will be, which kind of goes against the mellow aspect of this. I'm not a drug guy, as you all know, and I don't think running around in a state of inebriation is good and can lead to anything good. I know a lot of you disagree, and that's good. I'm glad you do. But, you know, there's a lot of downside to smoking pot all the time and drinking all the time. Okay? All right, let's get to the mails. We have some good letters here. Wendy Capathrone, Ipswich, Massachusetts. Ipswich, north of Boston, on the coast. If you go there, go to Woodman's. Ipswich clams. Woodman's in Ipswich. Legendary. Hey, Bill, I became a premium member tonight because I need your help. My 24-year-old son and I had a political debate over the Nazi group in Virginia. Told him everyone has a First Amendment right as long as they're peaceful. My son said the Nazi group has no rights, and we should have zero tolerance in allowing them to protest in any way. Well, I mean, look, Wendy, all you have to do is point to the court ruling. The judge allowed it, and under our Constitution, there aren't exceptions. As long as you're peaceful, you can say what you want, as long as it's not threatening or put anybody in a position of being in any kind of danger. Can't do that. Mark, Bradenton, Florida. Donald Trump is a daughter married to a Jewish man. I also believe he has a Jewish grandson. That's true. Appears to be on excellent terms with all these family members. When visiting Israel, he visited shrines and synagogues and observed proper dress and customs. These actions speak for themselves, and they do not connote any neo-Nazi or KKK sympathy. Very good, Mark. Good letter. I think it's right on. Your letter really is very, very good. Estelle in Decatur, Georgia. Bill, why can't you say the Antifa crowd are bad people? You know, I don't like the extreme elements of that crowd, but I don't know if it's smart or fair to say everybody who's protesting against so-called fascism is a bad person. I don't know if that's, I think that might be going a little bit too far, but I certainly don't like anybody who is using Antifa to do bad things. I mean, that's despicable. Ida, Kissimmee, Florida. Initially, Bill, I disagree with your analysis of President Trump's era was the inclusion of Antifa's violence alongside white supremacists. Not heard Dems or mainstream media condemn Antifa's tactics. Seemed unbalanced and unfair as they criticized the president's statement of violence on both sides. But as I listen closely to your No Spin News tonight, I understand your explanation and now agree. I've studied the history of the Nazis, which was far-reaching in its evil. The historical evil of Nazism and the infancy actions of the Antifa group cannot be scaled equally. Okay, very, very good, Ida. I'm glad I convinced you. I don't like the Antifa group, by the way. I don't think that they are looking at the country in a fair way. So I want everybody to know that. But I appreciate you, taking my words and analyzing it. That's what we'd like to see. And that's why this audience on BillO'Reilly.com is probably the most sophisticated audience politically in the country. Nancy Anderson, Chester, South Carolina. Many of the Confederate monuments erected throughout the South were by communities that lost so many sons, fathers, and loved ones in the Civil War. Few of the fallen were ever returned or given a proper burial, and few could afford an individual marker, so the ones left behind raised money for one monument to honor the dead. That's an interesting point, Nancy. Now, honoring the Confederate dead who fought for a cause that was unjust, but did they know that? Probably not. Most of them were teenagers. Many of them were illiterate. So, I think you really have to step back here and let history be displayed. Connie, Orlando, Florida, just renewed my subscription, even though it was only 119 days old. I want Killing England as soon as it's hot off the press. We have all of your books and have given many as gifts. Well, if you do become or re-up BillO'Reilly.com premium membership, you get Killing England free. It is now unbelievably relevant because of the statue stuff. And Martin Dugard and I tell you exactly how George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin behaved, who they were as people. So you can now know the truth about them and evaluate their lives in totality. This is so important. So I got a big break, as I wrote in the message of the day today, about the statue pulling down stuff. Killing England, they're coming after Washington and Jefferson, the far left. They're coming after them. They want to just wipe out all of our history and start over in their vision. Columbus is getting it now. All right, so good, Connie. I'm glad you're with us, and thanks for the letter. Gary Moore, Prescott Valley, Arizona. Bill, thoroughly enjoying your daily No Spin news. I recently renewed my premium membership. Was happy to get Killing England free. Keep up the great work. Okay, so we're moving on that front, and I'll be doing a lot of publicity for Killing England, and it's really good. You'll love it, I think. If you like the other Killing books, you really like it. Grace Izuhara, La Palma, California, just finished The Day the World Went Nuclear. Excellent book. Also read Killing the Rising Sun. Found there was much to be learned about that time. My paternal grandparents and the son were interned. My father took us to Clearfield, Utah. Read many books over the year about World War II and Japan's part in it. But all of the books that you've written, Mr. O'Reilly, put together stuff that I did not know. Well, Grace, the internment wasn't correct, but again, it was done out of public safety, hysteria, and when you read Killing the Rising Sun, you'll know why everybody was hysterical. Kelly Galbraith, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Bill, just finished watching the Killing Reagan and Killing Lincoln movies on Amazon Prime. I'm wondering if the movies are exactly what the books are about. They were very good. All the movies, Killing Lincoln, Killing Kennedy, Killing Jesus, and Killing Reagan, all four were excellent. And they stayed within the parameters of the book, no nonsense or craziness. Okay? So I'm glad you get them on Amazon Prime, and we're working on some movies down the lane about the other books, so we'll let you know. Okay, so if you want to reach me, it's Bill at BillO'Reilly.com or the message boards. Twitter followers, about 2,200,000 at Bill O'Reilly. We've got a lot of fun stuff in addition to serious stuff on Twitter. And the word of the day, and this is an easy one. If you don't know this one, then you really have to start on your vocabulary. Do not be a buffoon. B-U-F-F-O-O-N. And if you know any urchins, ask them if they know what buffoon means when writing to BillO'Reilly.com. All right, tomorrow we'll have audio again, and I'm savoring every last day of the summer. I hope you are too. Thanks for being premium members, and we'll talk to you again soon.